I'm Paul Nelson. I've lived in Brockway for 38 years, and my experience with Brockway goes all the way back to the late 1960s. And I've written a book called Lost Grand Resorts of Old Lake Tahoe. The inspiration for the book really came from the fact that I was familiar with Brockway's existence, but I could never find any information about its history. So I started digging into it and found a lot of fascinating things. We're down in the Brockway Hot Springs right now, which is a private development. The tennis courts here, there were two of them. Now one of them has been converted into pickleball. They sit where the old hotel actually sat. And you can imagine how lovely the view was from the rooms as you would look out across the lake. And then right beyond it is the pier. The pier is exactly as it was in shape back in the early 1900s. It's all been rebuilt. Calm area behind it where people bring their boats. The Tahoe used to pull up to the far side beyond the flagpole to load and unload passengers here. The hot springs are over the other direction. You can actually see where they are through the fencing of the tennis court. You see a wall that comes out at an angle sort of toward us with railings on both sides. That was the edge wall of the swimming lagoon that Harry Comstock built in, I think it was the 1920s, surrounding the hot springs so that guests could swim in the warm lake water. And then they built the pool in the 30s, and they didn't really need that anymore, but they heat the pool with the hot spring water. To the left, just below the water surface, because the lake is so high, you can see the concrete wall that was built right in front of the hotel. And they brought in sand. They brought in sand to create a beach. But unfortunately, in the winter, the waves would wash away all the sand. And so that's what's left. And you can see the hot springs enclosure over there. Again, see where that wall comes across at a bit of an angle. That used to extend all the way across to where the wall ends there. And if you watch it, you'll see bubbles coming up. That's what they called a hot well. It used to be deeper, and it was another one of the hot springs. But they ended up filling it in with rocks because it was sort of dangerous.
How cool, though.
All for smell, but...
Yeah. Neat. That's where the bubbles are.
There's a condo development when they rent out the condos, Brockway Springs, that's at the other end. The land went all the way down to the other end. And the original plan was to build 780 condos, and they got about 70 of them done. And they were going to work their way down here, but then they never did. And so it became a really lovely residential area. I mean, one of the fun stories was after the Calneva was built, it became a casino. Harry Comstock wanted to have something to compete, but he was in California. And he had the casino building, but it's not a gambling casino. It was an entertainment. It had a ballroom, game room, restaurant. But he supposedly hired a crew who went out and got the state line pillar and moved it down and put it right on this side of the casino. Technically, the border was never certain. And there was one border in the later 1800s that was down at the end of the Brockway land on the west end. They never resolved it. And so he had an argument that you don't know where the border is. It could be anywhere. They made him put it back. Originally, it was Brockway Point because the state line didn't figure into anything. And then it became State Line Point. But it's interesting. It's the Nevada side of the point is very steep as you come around toward the casinos. And that is a fault line for one of the main faults under the lake.